want to begin by asking you about the change in position by authorities. At first, they said it wasn't an act of terrorism, and then they came back a short time later and reported that it was being investigated as an act of terrorism. What sort of evidence could they have discovered to change their minds, to make them change their minds?
Well, in the beginning, actually, the chief or the mayor had said it was a terrorist incident, which it was, without any connection whatsoever. And the FBI said it wasn't terrorism at this point. But I think as soon as they figured out there was an ISIS flag on the vehicle, that's why the FBI took the lead so quick. That most likely it's going to be terrorism. Everything indicates that way. ISIS flag, IED in there. Some of the chat that was going on that they warned the Germans about before the Christmas attack over there. So I think the ISIS flag, as soon as they saw that, they had to say FBI has lead, that it's terrorism, and that's what we're seeing now. They've finally confirmed that.
So how does that change the way they conduct the investigation?
So I don't think it changes much because they went into it jointly, where I'm sure just for resources, they had the FBI there, the evidence response teams. It will now just be that all the evidence is going into the FBI chain of custody, Vice, the New Orleans PD. So they're probably collecting at the same point, waiting for that determination. I think when they got on scene and saw the ISIS flag, they knew FBI was going to take the lead. But it doesn't matter who collects it. If they're working with NYPD, New Orleans PD, they can jointly hold that evidence, bring it over to FBI control for a federal prosecution if there is one.
Is there any indication, anything that you see that shows he wasn't acting alone?
That's going to be tougher to prove. And when you look at it, acting alone and maybe inspired by either, say, these encrypted apps like Discord and Telegram, where they talk about this stuff, which is a blind hole for the federal government. Even it's hard to get into those apps and use them for evidence, for search warrants and other things. But I think even if he was talking on that, he might not have been planning with anyone else. And that's really what's hard to get into a threat stream when it's only in one person's head. He's looking at ideology. He's reading these groups. He might not even been planning it until he saw Germany happen. And then he gets that idea in his head. And since that time, he gets the vehicle, he gets the gun, he makes the IED. But if he's not talking to anyone about it, then it's really tough to really get inside that threat stream in order to prevent it. And that's why Al-Qaeda was so different. They were almost like a corporation like IBM, where they had to have approval up and down the chain of command to do an attack, where ISIS is like you slap a Uber sticker and you start doing it in the name of ISIS. They like that a sole individual can plan it and do it, and they get the recognition for it.
Lastly, I want to ask you about how easy or not easy it would be to pull something like this off if you were in fact acting alone. We know that there were safety precautions in place on Bourbon Street in the French Quarter last night because it was New Year's Eve, and obviously there is concern that when there are large crowds gathering that something like this could happen. But if you just want to go out and rent a vehicle or do something like this, is that hard or is that difficult to do without leaving any sort of trail, Rob?
It's absolutely easy. And that's why ISIS is like when they came about this a few years ago about, a sole individual driving into crowds, it's like ingenious on an evil way that it's really hard to control, because now, even if you look at the Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl that are going to go on today, they're going to harden those targets. They're going to restrict where vehicles can go. But all that does is pushes the crowd out further. So if you're looking at the Sugar Bowl and you can't get a vehicle in there, then there's going to be a bunch of Uber drop-offs and people walking from the hotel. And now those crowds are outside, again, that safety zone. And if someone just gets a vehicle, like you said, they rent a car or their car, and they just hit the softer targets. And that could be the people like all getting dropped off at Uber before you can't drive in any further. So anytime a large crowd gathers, you have to have situational awareness. You have to pay attention, because that in itself is a target. Large crowd outside of security.
Rob Diamenco is a retired FBI agent, and he is the founder of Sierra One Consulting. Rob, really appreciate your time with us today. Still so many unanswered questions. We are hoping to get some of those questions answered when authorities hold another news conference later this afternoon.